It's time to look at the Dynasty Fantasy Football trade market and look at some running backs to see where their value is at to determine if you want to buy or sell them. In this series, I take 3 running backs. I go over their trade values by looking at trades on MFL through the DLF Trade Finder, and I look at the trade analyzer, see where they're being valued at in terms of rookie picks, and then that gives you an overview of how they're being valued. Then I go off of how they could be valued here in the near future or towards the end of the offseason. If that's something you're into, you better hit that subscribe button right now, because I'm going to touch base on all the running backs eventually during this offseason, along with all the wide receivers. I also take ideas from you guys. So if there's a player you want me to talk about, drop it in the comments below, and I'll try and work them into the next video or two whenever I can get to them. But today we're talking about 3 running backs that are valuable in Dynasty Fantasy Football, and we're going to see what we should be doing with them. There's going to be an expensive player, a middle tier player, and then a bottom of the barrel cheap player. That's usually how we run it, and we usually work down the board from ADP and go from there. Our first running back that we're going to talk about today is Breece Hall. He turns 22 in May. He's the 8th player being selected off the board in startup ADP, being drafted as the RB3. So he's already being valued as an expensive asset. He rushed for 463 yards and 4 touchdowns before the ACL injury, caught 19 passes for 218 yards and 1 touchdown. He had 2 RB1 weeks, 5 RB2 weeks, and provided double-digit scoring in PPR in all 7 of his games. Other stats to note: he averaged 4.13 yards after contact per attempt, 7.7 yards after the catch per reception. From the combine, ran that 4.39 40-yard dash, 98th percentile size-adjusted speed score. Was used heavily in the passing game, especially once he got infused in the offense. We saw what he could do. We saw him blow up in the open field. We saw him do a lot of good things. Dynasty gamers might be able to capitalize off the ACL injury this offseason, and I think the price tag's going to trickle up through the offseason as well as we get closer to him being healthy and on the field. So the closer we get to that time, the more his value will shoot up. He's still expensive, but in some leagues, let's say 1,000 of you watch this video, there's going to be a few of you might be able to catch him at maybe a 10% discount or something like that. Looking at the trade analyzer over on dynastyleaguefootball.com, and you remember the video we did with Kenneth Walker in it, valued very similar to him, worth less than the 101, but worth more than the 102. That's in both 1 QB and 2 QB. So that's the value you're going to have to work with. One thing you got to think about is, hey, you got to be creative. And 2, you're going to have to add to that 102, 103 pick if you want to get him. People aren't going to ship him away. On the flip side, considering he's an injured asset, considering these picks might increase in value going forward, we might see these picks hit a stall point because this draft has been talked up a good bit. So you might see the 102, 103 stall a little bit between now and the draft, or you might see it shoot up as well. The value might be already baked into these picks. We'll see what the market does when we get there, but also in some leagues, you'll just see some weird trades, and you might be able to catch them at a discount. Someone might have rookie fever, and that's why you always want to kick the legs out of your league mates just to see if they got those feelings on somebody. But looking at the DLF Trade Finder, this app scrubs the trades on MFL, and we got some interesting ones. We got Breece Hall for a first and a second, Breece Hall for a first, second, third, and Wan'Dale Robinson, Breece Hall for John Mechie, first and third. It doesn't tell us whether it's like the 105, 102, 101, but imagine those firsts are up there. They're in January. None of these are in December, so imagine they know what they're getting. Breece Hall for Garrett Wilson, a second and a fifth. Breece Hall for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Breece Hall for Isaiah Pacheco in 2 firsts. He's expensive. We're expecting him to be expensive, and he's going to be expensive. We're not going to expect anybody to give him away. If we're expecting to catch a discount, look at the trades here. First and a second, probably 102 and a second. 102 and a second and third, something like that. A player like this, he's still young. Even though he's coming back from injury, he's still young. We saw the athleticism. He already popped at the NFL level. He's already exploding. He's a guy to try and go get, but he's not going to be cheap. Nobody should be selling him on the cheap, and if somebody is, that's shame on them. I don't expect any of you guys to get him on the cheap, but I would expect to kick the tires just to see if you catch somebody sleeping. When you know, you know. So maybe your league doesn't trade that often, or you got some league mates in your league that doesn't trade too often as well, then I understand on that. But when the value changes or just a little bit, or you're skeptic, always kick the tires. His value is going to increase throughout the offseason as he gets healthier from the knee injury, as he gets farther away from that. His value is going to increase as we get closer to the start of the NFL season, as we get closer to the middle of the season, whenever he's set to come back. He will increase in value to some degree. It might be at the same price, or it might be unattainable. Wherever it's at, it's going to be increased to some degree. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. Maybe he's unattainable now in your league. It really depends. There's a million different leagues out there, and we know he's expensive, but how expensive? You got to kick the tires and find out. I got another running back here. He's a mid-tier running back that could hold some value here in the near future. Maybe one of the few running backs that may not get flipped on their head during this running back reset that we're experiencing here in 2023 and 2024, and a big shifting of the tide. And it might be just for the short term, but it's something that you might be able to utilize for your dynasty team. I'm talking about Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. He turns 25 in April. Right now he's being drafted as the 91st player overall and as the RB30. So like an RB3 range is where he's being drafted at. Last year, rushed for 682 yards and 4 touchdowns, 8 catches for 58 yards, missed some games due to injury, had 1 RB1 week, which was bonanza, had like over 30 fantasy points in that game, 2 RB2 weeks, so he has been productive, even with David Montgomery there. Also had 5 double-digit fantasy scoring games. David Montgomery is likely gone. I don't expect him to want to try and catch a discount. So imagine he's going to test the market. He averaged 3.67 yards after contact per attempt, which is very solid. He signed with the Bears through 2024. So you're going to get a 2023 and 2024 out of him. So he is a big staple of the team. They're going to allow him to get some runs. He's an incumbent there. They'll probably bring in somebody else. There probably will be some competition either through the draft or through free agency. I don't see David Montgomery really coming back because I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the right move to do, but you never know what happens. I'm not here to guess things about that, but I do see them bringing in somebody else. But I feel like most backs are in a committee anyways, and where he's being valued at might be a good thing anyways. He's being valued on the DLF Trade Analyzer as a late second round rookie pick, which is fine with me. This is where we're getting to the part of the draft where things get a little bit weird, where there's a separation of your running backs and wide receivers, and you're down stepping some tiers. Once the running backs start getting ugly off the board, once the wide receivers are not your thing, once you get that feeling, maybe shoot an offer for them. That could be a late second. That could be the 302. That could be the 303. It's in your draft. It's in the moment. If you're into them, that's my suggestion. If you're not into that tight end that's there, the wide receiver, the running back, you're in that range, 211, 303, 304, 305, hell, let them tell you no. At least you shot your shot. But once you're in that range, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what running back they're wanting. You don't know how they got him valued. You don't know. Maybe you can shoot your shot there, or maybe it's too far back. You don't want to waste your time. I understand that. But once you're out of that range where the running backs are starting to fall off, that's when you want to go after them. You'll know. We'll know after the draft. We'll have a good feeling. But that's where we're at here. That's what the late second is telling us, really. He is being valued when the running backs are starting to break and tier, and there's not as much talent left on the board. That is where he's being valued at. That's what the market's saying. They're not saying late second. They're not saying 301. They're not giving you the exact pick. They're saying, hey, when this happens in the draft, this is when you probably need to go after him. That's what the market's saying by late second, early third roundish range. That's how I'm reading that. When scrubbing the trade finder, there's not a one-for-one trade. He's involved in a lot of bigger deals with a lot of players on one side, a lot of players on the other side. And honestly, when you have deals like that, you have to analyze them, and then there's a lot of other things you got to look at, and they become big packages that's hard to break down. Usually when they're one-for-ones, when you're talking about them on videos, you can kind of get a better feel. So I want to keep things nice and clean for you. There's no one-for-ones with him. He looks like a player that you would use to package up when you look at his value. Late second-round pick, mid-second-round pick, early third-round pick range. You add him to the player you're really using to get up to the player you want to package up with, and that's how you use them to get the deal done. I look for him to be a good value all offseason like he was last year, and you'll get some production. You know what you're pretty much going to get. You're going to get some productive weeks. You're going to get your ups and downs, but good RB3-ish, 4-ish, whatever, because Dynasty teams are different. They're built different. I talked to a guy the other day. He has 5 of the top 8 wide receivers, so the teams are built different. It's hard to speculate, but he's good to have on the back end of your roster after your top 2 or 3 running backs. He's a good guy to have on there. I got another running back that you can catch at a discount, and he is dirt cheap. And a lot of people are talking him up, so he's kind of taboo, but I figured I'd just throw him on this video anyway. That's Kenneth Gainwell from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's being drafted as the 143rd player off the board. RB44, turns 24 in March. Last year, rushed for 213 yards, 4 touchdowns, got 29 passes for 244 yards, had 1 RB2 week last year, 3 double-digit scoring weeks. Miles Sanders is hitting free agency. That doesn't mean he's in the clear, though. They could bring somebody in. This is a very, very, very deep running back class, so they can catch a good running back on the cheap this year, patch that hole up, and it's a deep running back free agency class, so he is not safe. No running back is really safe this year. Only maybe a couple. So that's something you got to think about. But there is some ambiguity to the situation. But the thing of what we're looking at here is the value and how cheap he's being perceived at. The trade analyzer has him being valued as a mid-third round rookie pick. That's dirt cheap. If the running backs or the prospects there is something you don't want, that's a guy you could potentially trade off to try and get a player that you can go after. I don't know if someone's just going to give him away at that price. That's one thing to note. Sometimes that asset on the person's team, you need a little bit more, but that feels kind of right. But trade negotiations might be a little bit different. Some of the trades I found, though, off the trade finder, Kenneth Gainwell for Ben Skowronek, Kenneth Gainwell, Teddy Bridgewater, 2 QB, Kenny Gainwell, Jerome Ford, and a 3rd. So he's cheap, but there's not many trades there, for example. He's usually involved in packages and deals. That's probably the best way to get him. If you're negotiating for a trade, much bigger players involved, and you're getting your main running back, you see him on their roster, maybe you can catch him as a throw-in. When you're seeing someone valued as a mid-third, late third, or something like that, probably the best course of action is get him as a throw-in in the deal. See if that can happen. Try to ask for throw-ins. That's not always going to work. Sometimes it makes things a little junky, but that's something you can try to do. Maybe you can sneak a couple players out of all your leagues, and it really depends on how many leagues you're in, who you're trading with. There's a lot of other scenarios other than this player's being valued this way and this player being valued that way. As for a sell or anything like that, there's not really much value right now. You can't really sell him and get much in return, so you might as well hold him or use him as part of your package piece or use him to package up and move up in the draft a couple of spots. I don't know how many spots you're going to be able to move up this year considering how these slots are being valued this year and how much more higher they're priced compared to previous years. But that's just something you could try. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but really just being objective here. With a player being valued in this range, you're really just going to have to be creative. He provides cheap depth, smaller back, can catch the ball in the backfield, very productive at Memphis, can be productive probably for short spurts. I guarantee he'll be in a committee there. I guarantee they bring in another back or something. They'll patch that up. So there could be a chance he's competing. I guarantee you there will be. but there is some potential that he may have some good games next year as well. But for the price, it's not really a horrible investment anyway, since it's dirt cheap, especially if you're catching him as just a throw-in. I've done that in a few trades, actually. I did catch him as a throw-in a few times over the year because he was just cheap and he just got thrown into the deal. I didn't really want him or needed him. I just asked for him. I knew that it was a chance, and I pulled the trigger, and I got him on a couple deals this year on much bigger trades. I was going after the other player. I think it was like TJ Hawkins or something like that. And I was able to pull Kenneth Gainwell with it as just a smaller piece with nothing extra added on my end of the deal. Just as a throw-in. Sometimes you just got to ask and be told no sometimes. It's just part of a sales technique. You just have to be told no a bunch of times until you get that one yes. Those couple yeses throughout the year is what's really going to reshape you over time. And it's hard. It's a lot of work sometimes when you're in a bunch of leagues and you're getting told no a lot. But eventually it works out for you, especially if you're working the trades. But those are 3 dynasty values at the running back position for this week. Let me know who you're buying, selling, or trading. Drop that in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button on the way out. It's going to help you going forward for your dynasty teams, your redraft teams, everything else. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.